Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Movement creates space for perception. Where to begin? Pretty much, I was thinking about how creativity arises and how there is, before anything, any action, there needs to be the space for the action. If you want to do a backflip, you got to have the space to do the backflip, you know? And I was wondering about the human mind's position and purpose and the importance of having activity creating more room for activity. In my own experience, any creative thing I've come to do from the beginning, sorry, not from the beginning, but in the beginning, in my youth, there was something very different. There was an attitude of distrust with the world. There was a lot of distrust. And my inner realms were very quiet. At most, I could visualize letters, you know, on walls. Like when somebody would speak about something, I could see it. But before that, I couldn't see it on my own. And now I consider back then my inner realms were inactive. So there was something about the trust in the activity that was creating the space for the next activity, for the next meaning. In my youth, I didn't have that trust, but then it flipped. When it flipped, my thinking also changed, what we call thinking. You know, it changed. It changed from words to images. And so I remember that transition. It began in the moment I chose to look. So I can say if back in the day my process of thinking was dialogue, the same sort of inner dialogue shifted to image oriented in the sense that every word can appear as an image. And if there is no image for the word, let's say hope, what image are you going to have when somebody says hope? I mean, of course, a lot of imagery comes from the person's accumulated experiences, but I'm saying that it's movement with uncertainty that creates space for a new certainty. And that movement in uncertainty, in my personal experience, appeared as a trust of my presence. Some people listening are going to be like, what is this man talking about? Imagine you find yourself driving in the passenger seat of a car that's being driven. Now imagine you blinked for a second and you suddenly opened your eyes in the driver's seat. Would you still have the mindset of a passenger? Most creatures are intimidated by the size of their world, and that's why they settle. The world is so vast, so many unknown variables. Just when you look at people on this planet, people dying every day, people being born every day, it's like this massive movement. In a book I'm writing, and the book's not complete, but in this book I gave the metaphor of a parking lot. Actually, two metaphors. Humanity can be seen as a ship. 8 billion people. Imagine they're on a boat, this giant boat in unknown waters. Or you can think it's this giant mall parking lot where 8 billion human beings, they drive in with their vehicles, they come and attend the event of life, and then they return back to their vehicles and leave. So when we think about we are in the same space as not only the past was, but that the future will be as well. You know, this current place I'm sitting right now giving this talk. In 1,000 years, there might be a condo here. There may be something totally different here. You know, there was someone who had emailed me. Excuse me. There was someone who had emailed me and asked me about my content, like how I come up with my content and who I am. And I'm like, man, if I tell you, it's like it's not gonna be Mr. Within anymore. But the thing, it was a good question though. It was a question that I knew one day it would arrive. You know, the content, just to say it very clearly to people, is that my philosophy on knowledge and how knowing and how intelligence works has completely changed. From thinking that I'm an individual static object that has to find content, that has to create content. If you notice, your mind is a content. The whole mystical practice is to see what is this content of this mind I have, you know? So it's filled with content. The issue is processing the content. So I wouldn't say, I would say every human being on this planet, they have seen with their eyes. And if you took the brain as like a video camera, the video brain has seen a lot of designs. When I draw, I go into my unconscious where I'm comfortable with all the patterns. You know, so I am not you might not believe it, but sometimes when I even give these talks, I choose to pilot beyond the conscious personality. But there is still a me, but the me is the context. It's not the immediate concept. So if you think you're the concept, you will notice the context changing. If you feel you're the context, concepts will arise endlessly. So many people don't realize what I'm doing is I'm looking at this strange world we're in. And because of its unknown variables, there is endless content. Till the end of our lives, there's content. It's just that we have to process this content. So, what it feels like to me, in regards to my inner realms, as I say, I'm going to say the inner realms and outer realms, guys, so long that it's going to catch up and people are going to start using it, hopefully, because it's going to help a lot of problems in regards to considering the person's psyche as neither good or bad, but rather different world viewed. You know, like back in the day, people were savage. When you look at religion, even though there's a lot of kindness, compassion, and all this, love of God and all this, but there was still at the time there were slaves, for example, you know. And so it wasn't per se a cultural update. It was more like a revelation, you know, a revelation and insight. It was something in the sight of the moment, rather than something that specifically can be given a picture. Because for me personally, religion actually doesn't have an ideological, a conceptual um, foundation. The foundation of any sort of uh, religious work is considered unknown. That means the main issue is this: did this arise from a human being, or did a human being pick it up like an antenna? Most religious people, for me, I feel deep down, they feel that the religion was some weird signal out of nowhere that appeared. Some people look at it and they're like, no. Why was it that then suddenly the revelation came? Why wasn't that before nobody cared? You know? What I'm trying to say is that if we can comprehend in any moment we're existing and experiencing a shift of the context or a shift of the concept, the world changes. So right now, see, there's two ways of speaking of a world. Of course, scholars have said this. There's two worlds, okay? And people are going to be like, Mr. Within, what do you mean two worlds? It's like, no way. But there's a world that it relates to your experience, and then there's a world that relates to your existence, as scholars say. What does that mean? That means there was a world here before you were born, and there will be a world here after you transition. Do you see what I'm saying? And then there's a world where it began from the moment you opened your precious eyes in this world, and it's gonna. Oh, sorry. I think I messed up the analogy. Um, okay, guys, just reset. Just for my own precision, two worlds: the world that was here before you, after you, and the world that started from the moment you got here and the moment you're gonna leave. Okay, and so the world that was here before you relates to your existence because your atomic existence is ancient. That means you go ask a scientist how old your atoms are, and you're gonna be surprised. They were older than time. They were older than we before we created the concept of time. Do you believe that? So, this relationship of a world of experience where our personhood animates in, and a world of existence that is impersonal before we were a person, and after we will, discontinue being a person, it will remain. So, for me, the unknown I keep talking about in these talks of mine, the unknown is that world, the world that was here before me and the world that's going to be here after me. And there is something about that world that feels to be the focus of the universe, because it's very strange. If somebody asks you, does existence die, you say no. Existence transforms. They say even in the first law of thermodynamics, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can transform from one form to another. So if we identify with the form, yeah, you've been reincarnating endless times, you know, or your energy's been transforming in different modes in different ways, you know. But the energy is the energy. There is something strange that the presence of man, our existence may be temporary, but the existence of existence seems to be endless. That means they even suggest that in trillions of years, oh, sorry, I don't know if it's trillions, maybe 4 billion. I think it's 4 trillion years. It's the Andromeda Milky Way galaxy collision. I don't know if many people know this, but our galaxy is considered to collide um, with Andromeda, which is our neighbor. That means it's like we're going to be roommates with our neighboring galaxy in about 4.5 billion years. So yeah, if anybody's around by then, it's like take a picture, upload it on social. And when that Andromeda Milky Way collision happens, this galactic collision, it will be such a unique thing because okay, here, let me see if I can paint this picture well. Imagine a balloon. Imagine coins on the balloon. As you fill up this balloon with air, and you have these pennies taped to the balloon, and assume the pennies are also expanding, but we can't. Anyways, So what happens is, as the balloon expands, as space expands, universes get clusters of universes get further away from one another. You know, what I'm trying to say is, if we were alive in the Andromeda Milky Way galaxy, some call it Milkomeda, which I hate that name. I don't understand why we're bringing milk into the galaxies. You know, no wonder people thought cows were holy. Our universe is, our galaxy is the Milky Way. It's literally like cow enlightenment. You wouldn't see any other galaxies. You would think we're alone in the universe if you were in the middle of the Andro Milky Way. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is, the person starts off like a bottom of a mountain. The view is different. You go on the journey. May not make sense. You may not know. You may not see the peak when you take a first step. But you keep taking steps, and each movement, whether you know it or not, creates space. So if you, as a human being, just think about it, that life is like sequence oriented. So if the person just it continues to remain active, there will be enough, there will be unknown space. Do you know? There was once in one talk I said the two most important words. If someone asked me what are the two most important words on this planet, I would say go forth. Those two words are the most important words on this planet. Because a lot of things can't be comprehended. When you're at the bottom of the mountain, you're not going to have the view from the top. Do you know? And so every step on this journey is a part of the mountain with a different view. And what's fascinating is we've built a civilization where people are chasing success. And what is that? They are not caring for all the steps it takes. They're only caring for the peak. So imagine you climbing a mountain, but not enjoying every part of the journey. And just when you get to the peak of the mountain, you're like, yay, this moment is nice, only to realize it's a moments of joy. You see, I noticed something about suffering that it made me ponder why in the Lotus Sutra they say that the Buddha, before transitioning out of this realm, the Buddha looks at his disciples. He's in a hysteria. His disciples are like, "What's up, Buddha? What's going on? Why are you freaking out?" And Buddha's like, "Everyone was enlightened from the beginning." The secret of the Lotus Sutra. That enlightenment wasn't for a person. So if you were not a person from the beginning, and when I say you're not a person, please be discreet. There's many audiences who are going to hear me speak. I'm not speaking only in regards to the social and cultural dimension. Even though we are individual, objective, oriented creatures, and somehow we went through an evolution that made us into a subject to ourselves, regardless of that, and regardless of the objective evolution, there is an inner life to the person. And this inner life has either been misinterpreted, misstorified, it has either been shaped too soon or kept not dynamic, you know? And so what it is that truth has been, there has been this strange attempt to use information to contain truth in a world which is dynamically, endlessly changing form. We are trying to use a cup as all our every word in all languages on the planet are like a little cup where we're trying to catch a river in. Like, we have such a misunderstanding of the nature of reality that we're trying to contain through sound and symbol. that which gave rise to the sound and symbol. This doesn't mean we have to go on the extremes. What I notice is that civilization has failed to keep the yin-yang symbol in mind. Do you know? That means the only tattoo I'm okay with is if it's the yin-yang symbol, you know? Once I thought I'm gonna get like I don't personally have a tattoo, but I thought if I'm gonna get a tattoo, I'm gonna get the um, YouTube link of my channel. Just to have that memory there, you know? For me, it's not about just nullification into pure bliss, supreme consciousness. Yay, everybody's one bowl of energy, you know? It's like energy doesn't have problems, people do. So when you're oneness in energy, there's no problems, there's no life purpose, there's no nothing. You know, and on the other side, if you go too materialistic, look at what happens. You get defined by the unchanging. That means there was a time I sat down and I asked myself, do I desire objects? Like it was such a fascinating moment where I wondered, why am I desiring objects? And why would I desire a subject? Like in my youth, when I was young, like super young, I wanted toys. But when I grew older, it was like, wait a minute, why is the object the only thing that we feel has more value than the subject? You know, because that's the issue with all the discrimination between people on this planet. The issue is the inner realm of one person can't notice the other person has an inner realm that is totally different than theirs, so they value the other person. So imagine like this, imagine somebody pushes you, okay, so you think everybody who's okay, here's a hilarious example, okay. Imagine you're young and somebody's walking up to you, you're smiling, you're like, nice, somebody's coming, you know, and then imagine that person comes and pushes you. And you're like, what? Like a nice person pushed me, you know? So the next time, just imagine algorithmically, just sequentially, like think of the brain as layers of Tetris, but in regards to experiential shift into conception. Okay, as if every time you experience that experience as a subject like a Tetris piece slowly falls into your unconscious, you know. The next time somebody, imagine, comes to talk to you, you suddenly push them away, and you've been pushing people away for years not knowing why, you know. imagine imagine something like that. So I'm saying, like, when we want matter, we want a picture from life. When we seek the greater pleasures of the mind, which is realizing you've got a mind, this mind is also where it's not only where suffering happens, it's also where joy happens. And the mind is like an instrument. That means you can tune your attention, and I'm not speaking in a new age way where, oh, tune your attention to a higher frequency, not like that. Literally from scratch, as if you were on an island as a subjective self, trying to comprehend the nature of the subjective self. You know, you don't know, I have an incredible respect for every idea that has made it so far. It doesn't matter good or bad. Sometimes it's not, for me, just people that are surviving, it's ideas. The fact that we have access to Socrates' quotes, it's like, yo. And we don't know, but here's the thing. What is efficient and valuable? It's not just survival of the fittest. In regards to conception, which language I consider to be a technology, it's survival of the fittest technology that defines the human being in a way that it survives the most. So the survival of the fittest is dependent on the survival of the most alert, something like that. That alertness was a quality of mind. I find it fascinating. We all have desires, right? Like people, we feel we have desires. I mean, you can say even you desire a glass of water, you know? Okay. So the thing is, it's like a subject desiring an object, but the subject is not an object to be able to enjoy the object. So what I'm saying is we are an appearance, a projection of self behind our eyes, which momentarily, based on how our attention, attributeless attention is in the moment, the attributes manifest. So I realized something. You can learn from your inner realms or your outer realms. To learn from your outer realms means you can't be a subject. The student is the end result of the teaching is not a subject. So that's how you learn from your outer realms. From your inner realms, you have to not chase. Just like how in human psychology, when a person feels they're being chased, they dislike it, you know. Similarly, your own mind and psychology, if you're chasing it a bit unnaturally, it's as if nature's going to be like, what you doing, man? I'm animating it too much, but really what I'm trying to say is that our outer realms are based on dynamism, movement, and the change in form. Our inner realms are based on stillness, the static, and the observance of change. So behind our eyes, we can't change, because if we were changing and there was something else also changing, we'll never ever, we can say it's impossible to ever see the world, because the self is changing, and the world is changing. So which is seeing what? Like, what is seeing what? You know? It's language. Language is it's a slower speed technology. Higher, there are so many. Ooh, there's so many don't think speed is just limited to a physical vehicle and is limited to just your biological movement. By physical vehicle, I mean using a technology to, like being a NASCAR driver or something. But what I mean is the speed in regards to the inner realm is not a speed of someone running from point A to B. The speed of the inner realms is the speed of evocation. Evocation means like you open the door, suddenly, surprise! It's like a birthday, you know? It's something new. So anytime your mind is doing something new and you notice it, you go into the observer. As you go into the observer, you abide by your presence. Your presence has no fear. Your personality needs fear to make intelligent decisions. Your personality is, believe it or not, 50% the environment. Because your response, your psychology is a response to the stimulus of the environment. Once I felt I had an audience with the logos of my moment, the inner logos of my moment. And I wouldn't say it was a question. You see, the inner realms are so instant. If you realize every question, the question is image before it is language. The image is always there. That means the questions and answers to everything are in life. It's all coming from the event. But the processing, the classification, okay, this phenomena of the moment it can be, this interpretation of the phenomena of the moment can be said to be the question. This interpretation of the answer can be, this interpretation of the phenomena of the moment can be said to be the answer. So what I'm saying is, when you realize the image surpasses the laws of the symbolic and the linguistic, the image has a presence. So when you really want to work with energy, you're not working like, I don't know how these Tai Chi masters are doing it in the parks and all that. But if I could somehow comprehend what is being done, is that energy is not identifying with shape. So you become information that is not in the form. So you become an information that is out of its own form, out of its own body, poetically and mystically speaking. The poet Rumi says, "Before death takes away all that is given, give away all there is to give." What does that mean? That means for the experiencer, it's going to be transition into the unknown. For the existence component of the human being, it's going to be a return. So I don't see the concept of death. I see the concept of return, because there was energy prior to form. And I feel like that's the thing is, so many people are, so many scientists and astrophysicists, just the scientific mind is focusing on exploring macrocosmic outer events, funding for the Hubble telescope. But I'm telling you, what's going to advance science is not per se the Hubble, just technological experimentation. Science has to understand that it has to integrate with a species. And when I say science, I'm not talking about, like, science is not like religion, but I'm saying it's a method. Science is a method, the scientific method. So scientists are those who are literally, their eyes are the scientific method. That means they are not themselves. They are the scientific method. You know. And of course, I'm not talking about everybody. I'm just saying certain human beings I've witnessed who I feel they were notable scientists, and their behaviors seem to be possessed with the method. That means unless the method updates, nothing will update. You know. So what I'm saying is, the secular and especially the scientific mind has to focus on two things. One, creating and allowing new language and terms for new concepts, being open to somehow utilizing the design value of the abstract. You see, that means, I feel every story has a geometry to it. So every story can be useful to another story if they can notice that geometrical translation, as if through a geometrical language everything is really the same. Everything is geometry. My inner realms are very geometric. Like, as a human being, as someone who, and I don't know why, I don't know if I stared at architecture too much when I was a kid or something, but like, my inner realms, the geometric component of it is in two ways, where I can impose geometry. So when I drive, for example, in the highway, I know the difference between my inner realms and the outer realms, because I can discriminate. I can project my inner realms over my outer realms. So that means it's like you were talking to someone and they don't see how great they can be, but you can see how great they can be. So you talk to their greater self. I learned this, believe it or not, from Persian culture. That means in Iran, in my experience, there was we'd have these huge gatherings, okay, family gatherings, friends, families, all infused, like friends were like family, you know, and there was something that would happen that anytime anybody would make a mistake in the gathering, there was I mean, of course, it has a good side, a downside, and a good side. There is an effort to keep an artificial level of politeness alive in Persian culture. Okay, but that artificial politeness actually is a backup system for people's restoration of character. So what it means is that in those gatherings, someone would suddenly maybe have a drink or something, get angry. The person would get angry, but in that instant, the others, like imagine two people fighting, instant, the two people come and calm them. Everybody comes and calms them. Even the person who's made a mistake, the host runs and says, no, 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 don't worry. It's nothing. Go, go, go. You know, don't worry about it. Whatever it is. Do you know? Because the idea is the restoration of the potential ability of the human being is way better than our uh, personality. If you care for your inner realms, you're the only one who sees the fruits of the inner realms. I'm just sharing them. You know, that means whether I give a talk or not, the mind experiences itself throughout the day. You know, I'm just giving a voice to a movement. You know, I'm like putting a flashlight on a river at night. I remember in Iran we had a cottage, and when me, my brother, and my cousins, when we were young, at night, late at night, we'd all get flashlights and go out and explore the, you know, by the river of the cottage and whatnot. I feel the more the person in life can honor the unknown earlier, the less they can actually get conditioned from what they naturally are. That means something strange happened in my youth where a lot of my behaviors and memories, when I look back at my memories like a photo album, it's like, you know what it is? The mystical angle of it, just to say this, is that you think you're wrong, so you're looking for what's right, only to realize nature was right, you were wrong about thinking you were wrong. And then there's the restoration and again an internal authorization. The inner authorization is very crucial. If you don't give yourself permission, you shouldn't want permission from others. Do you know, I have this mentality that, trust me, it came from me acting soft and weak in my youth. And that softness and weakness got slapped. Not physically, but just by karma. I got pushed. I got pushed away from the the way I was using the energy of my life. It felt like as if my mind was a piano and I wasn't playing it properly. And now it doesn't. I won't say right now. It feels like I'm 100% playing it properly. It just feels now I'm comfortable with the instrument in my hand. In my youth, I wasn't comfortable with the faculty of intelligence that is the main administering factor of our attention. That means if somebody tells you why is there attention, we say to see the world, to receive the world. But interestingly enough, the same attention is also used to express. So your attention, again, is like a sword and shield. Nowadays, back in the day, people would have a sword by their belt. You know? There's something about, I don't know, like old school, I could say about the medieval time where skill was superior. But now, when technology has replaced the superiority of our skill, many people will not attempt. So we can say the more selfish the human being is, and the less they realize there is a civilization that we gotta advance here, the more technology is living our lives. So selfishness in 2020 will translate as technological domination in the future. Because if you just care about you, you don't get to see what else is out there. Maybe something out there needs you. Maybe you right now, if they put you in, if there was a problem on this planet and they some like imagine like a chess piece, somebody grabbed you and put you exactly where you could solve that problem, you would see every human being has an incredible value, but we are not in that location, and it's strange. It's like you see, there's this genius guitar player in a village somewhere on the outskirts of town, and nobody knows he exists. You know, there is a danger to accepting the weak earlier than accepting the strong. There's a danger to accepting being okay with inefficiency before inefficiency. That means imagine you became not an perfectionist, but you became someone who was attempting to perfectly look at the imperfection. You will be surprised. Your life will turn around. I can tell you that the mind goes through different states. There's states where you feel more anytime I move or speak or there's anything animate, I feel I am matter. I am matter moving, and because matter is moving faster than the other, matter is the definer. But there are moments, for example, in dream states when I'm conscious, where in that dream state, the mind is moving faster than matter. Matter becomes the servant of the mind. But when you are awake and you physically move, the mind becomes the servant of matter. Do you know? It's like the meaning of life. I feel any person who's really wondering about that question, because it's a natural question. We're in the middle of nowhere on a rock, on a pebble in a light beam. Of course, we're going to have some deep questions, The universe is mysterious. The more mysterious the universe is, the more deeper everything becomes. So the word deep there's no point of even using the word. Everything is deep, you know? Reality is shallow. Reality is like taking two steps into, you're by the beach into the water and feeling the waves hit your feet, and then the other is like being a scuba diver or being like a future astronaut pressure training underneath the water. You know, I don't know if many people know this, but astronauts they practice underwater before they go because there's a lot, like, it's an intense situation. We are so defined by our space that we feel free to move in it. It's sometimes when you think about what freedom is the space to move, the space to be, the space to live. There was this idea that there were enlightened civilizations, but they descended. Not It's like we have in the Abrahamic tradition, man being created in the heavens and descending, falling. The fall of man. And so we can envision an let us say, an enlightened civilization, a civilization completely aware of all modalities of self identifiable with the human form. That enlightened civilization, its dissension is man being pushed towards selfishness. There's this idea that if the world was doing its job, man didn't need to think ever. But when the world is not doing its job properly, man arose to, take care of the problem. Because life transcends psychology, especially psychology based on language. This is what I noticed from animal psychology. I'm like, how are psychologists, like when you look at an animal in nature, the complexity of its movement, the complexity of what it may do, it's all based on the stimulus. Your psychology is based on the environment. If we just built an advanced civilization right now, you would feel and be an advanced being. You would totally feel you're skilled. People are just trying to be one step ahead. I'm telling you, be as many steps ahead as you can fathom, and then you'll see how far you'll naturally go. So here's the thing. This is why I feel people get nervous when they go on stage. This is how I handle any sort of public sort of, when I'm giving a talk or something, the public emotion of it. Of course, it's a bit overwhelming because it's unknown minds with unknown ears. But the thing is, if you think only one step ahead, you will be intimidated. You will intimidate yourself out of greatness. But if you think, like, here's the example. I'll use myself as an example. When I started in 2014, when I wanted to give these talks, I wrote 10,000 talks for the betterment of mankind. Simple. Just simple. I'm a human being. I'm part of a species. And I felt, okay, let's speak. There's freedom of speech. Let's speak. And granted, it wasn't the most financially abundant period of my life. But anyways, what happened was when I started to fathom, like, am I gonna, choose this name and create this channel and 10,000? And then I realized, I totally isolated myself out of the cultural and social program. Like, I think everybody has this ability, but it's not polished in everyone. That in any moment in my life, I can go in my inner realms and totally block the outer realms. That means there could be a crowd of people shouting at me, and I will be in my inner realms. You know what it is? It's like a bird that when something comes close that it doesn't like, it flies off to a higher branch. So if I thought 10,000, so that means if I should be able, like, I was thinking about it, if I can give these 10,000 talks, giving one talk should be as simple as a breath. Should be super easy. So when I increased the aim of my goal, then I automatically updated myself instantly. So I would say people feel that life is hard. That the hard, first of all, can't exist without the simple. First thing. The second thing is, it's not hard. It's a movement. It's just a massive movement, this life. And attention, as it moves with it, can identify with it, or the world can identify the human being. So let's say if you wanted to, even what is this? What's his name? Is it Robert Greene? He says 10,000 hours to master something, right? So let's say you want to become an astrophysicist, and you decide to read 10,000 journals on astrophysics. Or it could be drawing. Let's say drawing. You want to draw. Every day you come and you draw. If you want to draw, let's say 1,000 artwork, then it becomes super easy. You just want to get one done, go to the next, get one done, go to the next, get one done, go to the next. So there's no time for nervousness. So make your moment so important that the efficiency of it is more fascinating to you than its inefficiency. Because it is true that to err is to, what is it? It is to be human is to err, something like that. That means everybody makes errors. Do you know? Nobody should be intimidated by the false perfection of another. The mind is changing. So that's how we build an advanced civilization. We reset. We reset 8 billion moments defined by just their past. And we say, dear humanity, shall you enter your future? Or shall you keep hiding behind the walls of your past? Because when else can all the potential behind your eyes be externalized? You know? Hopefully now the listener knows what it means is now or never. What that sentence means. That's my inspiration. Anybody who wants to know where my content comes from, now or never. There's a vision, you choose to advance or you choose to stay. That means in this life, it shocked me because all psychology is effort. It's binary effort, no effort. That's it. That means I thought about myself in the future. I'm like, how will my exit happen? How will I leave this plane of existence? Will I vanish in an instant, or will I deteriorate through time? How will pain visit me? How will my suffering watch me as I perish? Or will there be greater audiences? Who knows? Because we don't realize it. The reason we want objects is because if we don't want an object, that's like not wanting our own body. So the desire for the body, as long as you have a body, is impossible to feel like you can be in a body and have no desires. It's like it doesn't make sense. It's impossible. The person still has to desire a glass of water again or something. What if you realized that every enemy or regardless of friend or foe, let's say enemy, regardless, it's like you will realize you have never seen the eyes of the enemy. You can never see the eyes of the enemy, and the enemy could never see your eyes. That means it's an inner realm justification, the concept of an enemy or a friend. It's an inner realm assumption. Not assumption, consideration. Declared assumption. Or a committed assumption. The void stands watching. That means it's not only the gods of mythology watching man as he makes steps. The void is watching. And the void is energy before a personality, and the gods are a personality before energy. So pretty much, if language must experientially update, and people should be able to discriminate with their inner realms And they have to realize that um, this species only has itself. Like people can go try to be like Tarzan and live with nature. With you can go run with the buffalo, but the buffalo are going to be like, who is this guy? What is this creature doing around us? Yeah. you know. The language of the future will be an inner, will be just more consciousness and alertness and awareness to the internal cinematic language. You might not realize it, but as you breathe, your mind simulates. Every movement has an influence. There's a story about Sri Ramana Maharshi. Sri Ramana Maharshi, sorry guys, let me go eat something. Quick intermission, guys. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Okay, so I'm back, guys. All right, let's continue. I ate something so my stomach doesn't make an interruption again. All right, let me see. Movement creates space for perception. Perception is the relationship of matter in space and different positions of a matter that is the self and the matter that is the other. You know, that means it's strange, but we think we only see ourselves when we look in the mirror. But I feel every person we see, we are seeing our own experiential analysis of them. Now, let's say we had 8 billion human beings who suddenly realized they weren't thoughts and they were all in this unknown, let's say, potential unity. What would happen? That means it's one thing to just say an advanced civilization, but it's another thing to actually picture it. When we start, let's say, okay, here, let's say, just like Jordan Peterson says, um, clean your goddamn room. But as Jordan Peterson says, clean your room, there was this man named Slavoj Žižek who was debating Jordan Peterson. And he says you can't tell a person in North Korea and in such a messed up state to clean their room. So I can see that we focus on self-development as people, as members of a civilization. We develop ourselves to a point where we can see the potential of civilization. Then we choose to work in civilization. So imagine having a precondition to work. You got to actually care for where you are, or good work won't show its face. I see technology and external events causing uh, unified communities. That means people are fighting over truth. But if it was an alien attacking the species, they would not fight each other. They would fight the alien. What does that mean? That means there is always a greater event to play a game in. I feel to some people the void speaks, to some people the infinite, and to some they are the voice of the witness of both. The presence of the human being. So it would be perhaps, I mean, I could tell you right away, um, the future is gonna, anything that we are, anything that a robot can do, we will not do. The way it's going right now, civilization. So what does that mean? That means the future, you're going to be more a mind moving a body, and now you're a body moving a mind more. Phenomenal, no? The secret of attention is how universe is here through effort. If there is any truth, that is an energetic expression. You can say the words don't matter. The names, the language, the personalities, on some level, it's just creatures roaming this earth. They're just roaming in different ways. And ever since the information age, we have not just cared for our own eyes, but we have cared for how we perceive others and what their eyes could be. People are fascinated not just with their own eyes, but with the eyes of their world. Imagine you back in the day, you suddenly turn around and see 12 of your tribesmen are staring at something, and you're staring the wrong way, and you suddenly turn around and you're the last one to notice that there's an elephant scene for the first time, for example. Yeah, so Mr. Grateful's got the picture. He says the void behind the eyes, infinite in front of your eyes. Yeah. I mean, think of it this way. If you want to draw something, you need a piece of paper. That means perception is the inner realm being conscious of the outer realm. Movement can be the outer realm moving before the inner realms. So for me, I'm like, let's forget the whole theist and atheist costume display, narrative costume display. Let's just look at the design, the architecture of what the idea implies. Are we a field of intelligence that is moving the particles, or are we particles moving that are projecting fields? Objectively, the biological body, it's projecting an electromagnetic field. You know, and the fact that there's an electromagnetic field to things, to matter, is the coolest thing. It's the suggestion that we were destined. It was as if you know what it is? Sometimes I feel, could it be that the universe was planted like a seed? It was planted like a seed, and the tree has not stopped growing. And at some point, the seed sprouted, and it moved towards, and it moved beyond the soil, and it began becoming defined by a totally different environment. So that means, here's the thing, if we have a state of mind, I'm just saying, like, we've been thinking for too long we're just a character in a story that's an object, somehow strangely mysteriously being a subject. That it's too long for that. I think we have to now explore the mind like a designer that is looking at movement and design before narrative, before the love of words or the hate of sound. There is just design, the movement of design. The geometry, for some people on this earth, it's going to liberate them. This recognition that it's a hidden language of the being. You look in everything, there is geometry. There is geometry in a snowflake. There's geometry to your DNA. There's geometry in the atom. The other dimensions, we have had no other choice other than to perceive them as different geometrical movements in design. So, I was saying this like, imagine you're a parent and your child has tried a skill, something, you know, and the child has failed. And the parent goes to the child and is like, "Child, what's up? Why are you crying?" And the child's like, "I failed. I'm a loser. I can't do it." Now the parent, usually, what does the parent say? "No, you're not a loser. You're a winner too." Instead, the parent should say, "What did you say? How do you know? How do you know that if you don't continue, you don't attain mastery? How do you know? How do you know you don't know?" Is another wonderful question. Fear has drawn too many pictures in front of the eyes of man. But when the eyes realize they are not image-based, then who can have fear? That means who are you to even fear fear? Language is a technology that if you think you are, it is cruel. It's being misused. Language is a technology that, for me personally, I feel the truth of reality is beyond language. Language was just after some point, just like we sparked fire. We were like, all right, let's attach symbols to objects. Simultaneously, we'll think that object is that symbol. So this becomes a cup, that becomes a screen, this becomes a wall, that becomes a key. So when we realize the inner realms is holding language, you realize knowledge is not something to teach. It's how you're looking at the world. How, and especially how you're aware of the unknown. Where when you get to that point, I would say it's as if Carl Jung, a general of the inner realms of man, a general who made advancements and explorations in the inner realms of man. For me, all philosophers, they may, in their social or cultural value, might have been miscalculated, but in regards to being a human being that has dared wonder about the other possibility, we must care for the exploration of greater designs. It's very hard, to believe it or not, give it an image. I don't know how people are believing in things in a changing world. How are you doing this? Please write me a letter and tell me, how are you believing in phenomena when phenomena, both the self and the world, change? And people feel they fail. People feel they succeed. Who is energy feeling conscious? Is energy conscious of itself when energy is being happy? Are we trying to make energy happy in this world? It's like we live our lives and at the end energy's like, thanks guys. Okay. Perfect. What incredible question Herok in the chat section has asked. And great question. I'm going to give my view on. He says when something like Neuralink is there, Neuralink is this company that's trying to connect the brain to create a technological interface for consciousness. I don't know. Very complex act to connect the brain to technology, when our technology has so many problems. So Herok says when something like Neuralink is there, what is happening with consciousness? And isn't it something like telepathy we will use so language is obsolete? Okay. If you think the linguistic language, think of right now, you speak multiple languages. Right now, whoever's listening, not just languages, for example, if you're bilingual, English and another language. I'm just saying, you speak the language of words. You speak the language of number. You speak the language of design. You speak, trust me, you're going to see in your inner realms, there is life moving at different speeds. I could say my inner realm is a vacuum for different experiences projected in this vacuum, endlessly moving. Sometimes if you don't embrace chaos, you can't even find the order. That means you have to engage chaotic moments to be like, why is it there? What is it pointing to? Language is not obsolete. Language was hollow from the beginning, Eric. Language was a world inside a world. If we work more in regards to a collective field of being, we're going to be less individuals. You can say the moment we connect the head of the first human being to the internet, that human being will have access to so much information or a certain range of information that they will no longer be human. They will be information based. That means their mind is being generated not from information from a natural landscape, but is filled up with information in endless simulations of subtler cyberspace landscapes. That's at least how I envision it when I consider it. So for me, our understanding of language, we will not be people then. We will be um, we will it's strange and kind of chaotic to think about, but we will be more information outside of our consciousness than inside of our consciousness. We will be the unconscious of a digital field. We will experience non-duality, therefore a transition of individual identity into the background. So just like how we say the body, and when the person gets old, the body dissolves, breaks down. So similarly, we can say our psychology throughout time in a technological civilization will go into a point where it's no longer going to be individual. So when you're not an individual, you're not going to have the problems of a human. It's not like when you're no longer human, you don't have human problems. You know? Like zombies in movies understand this. You know? Imagine someone writes a zombie survival guide, but it's for the zombie, you know? Hollywood will probably make that movie one day. Guys, language is geometry. Light is geometry. Language is geometrical light. What does that mean? That means the way I'm speaking to you right now is that there was a precondition of light for sight. Sight was a landscape. And then there was a precondition for an individualism, someone to decide. And then the decision maker choosing one probability, and then that being the sentence spoken. That's how my inner realms appear. So if we were to consider technology, so I would ask your question differently, Herrick. I would say, what happens to the inner realms when we're no longer an individual? I have a feeling we're gonna be rhythms of experiences. In Vedic thought, in certain yogic thought, there's this idea of reincarnation, but there's this idea that there's a oversoul as well. It's not just the idea of reincarnation alone. It's like bigger and bigger and bigger groups of souls are reincarnating, and their branches are like the incarnation of the person. So the yogi back in the day, they did not feel they are the only ones looking through their eyes. So Herrick says, which is the border between the 3D consciousness information Neuralink and the higher dimension pure consciousness? The higher dimension pure consciousness, it has no concept. It's presence. The higher dimensions are too instantaneous. So language can't go. You can't go with language. This is why I'm saying all those people who are being esoteric and they're having ritualistic ways. Like Buddha came and put ritual metaphysics to rest. He said, "Hey man, regardless of whatever outer act you do, the inner realms are there too." You know, it's as if not realize. It's like taking an image to the inner. It's like it's like the same way a person puts on a mask and they think they're the mask. It's like if you seek information, if I just feel esoteric communities are being rude to the unknown. They're being childlike. So the unknown scolds them like a child or gives them treats like a child. It's strange. It's not the wisest approach. The wisest approach is to recognize there is design and there's opportunity. That means after, so I was like, wait a minute. If we think of human beings as problem solvers, then it's as if that's a dimension separate. Intelligence is a dimension separate from identity. And if it's a dimension from separate from identity, that means we can say the internet is going to be like, imagine Carl Jung, we got a time machine. Whoever's, every 11 people are listening. Let's say we all got a time machine and we went back and we found Carl Jung. Then we took Carl Jung to the future where Neuralink, they were about to connect the first, successfully, the first mind to the computer or something. And Carl Jung immediately was smart enough to catch up quickly to figure out what's going on, even though shocked. And then Carl Jung would say, "Oh my God! A second ago, I just said, unless Carl Jung has a quote. He says, "If unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." So Carl Jung, in that moment, his mind's going to be blown because he's going to see the unconscious made conscious. But it's the collective unconscious. It's not necessarily your unconscious. So you could say there is an unknownness to just your inner realms when you're alone with the cosmos. And then there's an unknownness in regards to the event and the spirit, poetically, the spirits at work. That means on some level, sure, you can think it's individuals building civilization. On another level, you can feel it's a bunch of collective beings, collective fields, trying to build an advanced civilization. Because the idea is like there was this saying in Sufi tradition, even though it's an unauthenticated hadith, but it's called hadith Qudsi. And it's the saying that God, it's like this sentence in the narrative of God, from the image of God, where it says God is okay, let me find the exact thing and say it, you know. I know what it is, but I'm gonna do this just in case we can add better precision. All right, guys. So this hadith Qudsi in the Sufi tradition. It's I mean they take it seriously, but in the general Islamic tradition, they consider it to be unauthenticated. But anyways, um, this is what the hadith. This is what God is saying. It's like from the viewpoint of God. It says, "I was an unknown treasure, and I wish to be recognized. So I created the creation and introduced them to me." No, this isn't the one. Oh man, just a second, guys. That's not the. That's a rent. Okay, guys. So here's the thing. It says I was an unknown treasure, but I wanted to be known. So I created creatures and informed them of me so they knew me. Oh my God, what are these translations? It's as if the universe is this unknown intelligence that wanted to know itself. It's poetically as if man is God's reflection in the mirror, but the reflection is not the God. The light beam is not the sun. So I find psychology to be very similar, where there is the unknown, the unknown of your life, that every day you're waking up and you're like, okay, let's see what happens today. Let's see what happens today. On some level, it is pretty intense for trying to become precise, because time is strange, but I would say it's an unnatural concept. Even though we're natural beings and have developed it, but it's a concept where when you look at animals in nature, when you look at trees, it's like, whoa, what is their confidence? They're not thinking they're late to anything. They're not rushing. They're not being anything other than what they are. How is man being something other than what he is? And I realize it's the future. But the future that when you identify as a thought, you think you have to just run there. Little did the inventor know, usually when you least expect it, the invention, the genius strikes like a lightning bolt. That means Nikola Tesla was feeding pigeons in the park. Suddenly he gets the vision of the AC motor, which all technology depended on, you know? And he draws it with a stick in the dirt, you know? It's so understandable. Back in the day, paper was hard to find, you know? Now we don't we take for granted how valuable our phones are, how valuable information storage and the ability to do that is, you know. This is why writing for me is divine. The action of syncing an inner realm rhythm with an outer realm knowing, an inner realm unknown rhythm with an outer realm knowing. That's why I'm telling people, write. It's an evolutionary pattern. Think of how many human beings who at midnight they would light a candle and they would just write at a table. It was as if they were alone with their mind and with the hope that one day maybe the world would hear their stories. Because there's so many stories, it's chaotic. For me, this idea of heaven and hell, I was like, is God cherry picking which story is better and which story is not? That means this human being, I don't like his sin level, you know, out. This being, I like his deed level. He's in. You get a free ticket. So I was thinking, why the narrative with the complexity, and that's the thing which Hadith Qudsi explains. The reason the idea of God doesn't make sense for man is in the sense that God made man for his senses. I'm being poetic here, guys. I'm just saying the ideas. I'm speaking on a designer conceptual level. So what I'm saying is, if we entertain the notion of a creator to the universe, you don't create things for the end. You don't make the invention for the invention. You make the invention for people who can use it. So it's like design requires effort. That means it's as if something is sculpted. Can you imagine, like, we throw, let's say, a plastic bottle, we release plastic bottles in outer space or something, and years later, let's say some civilization suddenly sees, like, I don't know, um, let's say something with a water company logo, like, water, like in some water bottle, Fiji water or something. That alien species would be going to be like, what made this? What God? If we think everything is natural, what if we are the unnatural debris of a distant civilization, you know, from long ago, Not every, after some point we reach a level where it's too instant, the meaning of the moment, to be put into a narrative, The mind is like a lion, believe it or not. You can entertain your body emerging from chimps and a strange descendant, unknown descendant, or but the mind is like a lion. That means you don't trust, unless like the lion is not like the hyena. It has to, through its own experience, attain what it wants. Do you know? If the hyena is like, okay, food on the ground, let's eat it, you know. But the lion is like, do you know what I mean? It's like very zen. The lion is more enlightened, you know. The lion has more self-respect, even though it's not conscious enough to be an ideological self, but it has more self-respect than the hyena, you know. So if the mind is a lion, that means it has its own roar, and it cares for its own inner realms moving, not just the outer realms move so the inner realms can. Honestly, if somebody asks me what is the best thing human beings can do for the next 30 years, I would say advance communication. People have to share their inner realms. I'm going to tell you the story, speaking about lions. A man hopelessly is walking in the forest. He feels he has nothing. He feels he is nothing. He feels the world is going towards nothing. He shouts to the sky and the forest, and he says, God, show me a sign. Send me something. Like the guy's, like it's like a broken soul waiting for the world to move it, you know. The man shouts to the universe for a sign. For what should he do now? It's all come to nothing. And as he's walking in the forest, he sees something so overwhelming, he instantly covers his eyes. He sees something as if it was unworldly. And he sees a grown wolf with no legs. And he can't process, how is it that this wolf without legs is alive and healthy? And suddenly he hears the growl of a lion or something, like he's like, okay. Quickly goes on a tree and he's just watching, you know? The lion brings food for this limbless wolf. the man suddenly feels like, holy shit. The man looks at it shocked, and he's like, this is the sign. That wolf is me. And if I just stay as a limbless wolf, God will give me, the lion will give me what I want. The guy goes back to town, decides to sit on the ground and do nothing and be nothing in a world that's going towards nothing. He's sitting there, he's even, it's the ultimate let go. And he's let go. And suddenly, this Gnostic priest is walking by, and as he's walking by, the Gnostic priest for a second stops, and he's like, what is this grown man doing on the ground? In his mind, he's thinking this, and he just stares at this guy, this Gnostic priest. And the guy suddenly gets up as if he's like, whoa, somebody who at the time, like, priests were the beacons of wisdom, you know? For that time, the Gnostic priests I'm talking about, in regards to Gnostics. Because Gnostics, these priests were so philosophically oriented, they would put skulls on their table in the church, and they would comprehend what it means to be alive, what it means to die. So there was a huge philosophical dimension of people believing in religion and wondering, is it true though? Regardless of their belief. If their belief is before or after, or if it needs to be there even at all. So what happens is the guy gets up, goes to the Gnostic priest, and says the whole event, what happened, that he was feeling hopeless, he was feeling like nothing, and he went to a forest and he saw a lion feed a limbless wolf, and he's like, what the you know? And he looks at him and he's like, back in that time, he says, this is a sign from God, I know it. And why hasn't God, the lion, given me, the limbless wolf, what I want? Why is God not feeding me? And so the Gnostic priest looks at this guy and says, hey, you got the first part right. It was a divine message. But you are not the limbless wolf. You were shown that to realize you're the lion. You gotta be the lion. Do you know what I mean? And being that lion in modern times means you honoring your experience, but also honoring the world that your experience is here for. It's strange. It's as if the universe made the problem, and then also the solution is being born every day into this world. You know? So that's the thing. The movement that creates space for perception, you got to care for your own eyes. Because nobody else sees your eyes. I don't even understand, like, the concept of, I don't think it's even possible to pity people. It's impossible. We don't know who they are. We know who we are. And we know what we see of them. But we don't know how their eyes are looking at this world and the chaotic dimension to it. You know? So honoring your own unknown dimensions gives you access to new known angles of the world. I don't know how else to simplify it, guys. I'm simplifying it so much, there's no concept anymore. you know? It's like, who knew at the edge of simplicity was the ultimate complexity, the void? There's a story, I don't know why I'm feeling like going into the story time. Guys, before I share another story, I just got a very humorous thought, that yogis renounce the material life because they thought life was a dream and an illusion. And then I thought, as if, imagine a yogi, a ghost came to him, and how would the yogi psychology respond to that ghost, you know? And I thought the yogi's gonna be like, ghost, like the ghost comes to scare the yogi, and then the yogi says, ghost, don't you get it? You're part of the illusion right now. you know? That means the yogi would probably tell the ghost it's not a ghost. You see, it's the mind is very complex. Behind our eyes, we move as attention evoking a world. So I would say, in front of your eyes, the body moves first, then the world. Here, I'll say it like this: behind your eyes, you move as a world through the edge of your attention being the embodiment. In front of your eyes, you move as a self in a world. So the difference between the inner realms and the outer realms is that reality is like free imagination. Imagination, you don't have to imagine. It's just there. But the inner realms, it has to be evoked. It has to, when I say evoked, guys, I mean literally like an envelope, it has to be opened. People don't realize Carl Jung was so smart. I gotta check something out here. I gotta see Friedrich Nietzsche, um, birth day. Okay, 18. Now let me see Carl Jung. I gotta double check this guy's. Hang on. Okay, so Friedrich Nietzsche was born 1844 and died in the 1900s, exactly 1900. And then Carl Jung was born 1875 and died in 1961. Died in 1961. Okay, 1875. So Carl Jung was 25 years old when Friedrich Nietzsche died. So a 25-year-old Carl Jung, imagine hearing Friedrich Nietzsche dying. So I could totally see the inner realms of Carl Jung, because Friedrich Nietzsche declared a statement. People don't realize how incredible of a philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche was. He's one of the most advanced. His inner realms were one of the most advanced, ever seen. You know. So Friedrich Nietzsche said, God is dead and man killed him. And I'm thinking a 25-year-old Carl Jung is hearing this, and he's like, how do we imagine Carl Jung? In some sense, he felt the species' collective outcome um, had to have some sort of respect from where it began. That means, for example, people, they don't have the notion of God, but they respect their parents. When the child is young, the parent in India, they say that your parent is like your first God. you know? Carl Jung, his genius was that he brought forth this idea of the collective unconscious. And so, just to, I guess, direct it towards the talk and the chat section, I would say, so Mr. Grateful says invocation for inner realms and evocation for external. I would say it's just you're internalizing the external and externalizing the internal simultaneously. And endless stories can be generated from you just choosing to slow down and just, and anytime the person slows down, they see more out of the event. You can just think about it. When you run past an event, you don't notice much, you know? Your attention is like the spotlight where you are being a performer to yourself. The story I wanted to share, you can see in the story how a person at the end of it, they realize the value of their inner realms. There's this Zen master, I don't know his name, but there's this sage, and he has a bunch of disciples in like this temple or something back in the day. And one of the disciples steals, has started stealing in the temple. Now the disciples didn't care, thought it was like once in a one, like just a one-time event. But the thing keeps happening, and they eventually bring it up, and they're like, "Hey, Sage, what do we do? This guy's stealing." He's like, "Don't worry about it. Forget him." You know. And then the thing continues, and then the second time they're like, "Sage, he's doing it still," and the sage is like, "Forget it. Forgive him." You know. And then the third time, all the disciples gather around and they're like, "This is ridiculous," and they know who the thief is. And they hold the thief, they take that guy and they bring him to the sage. And they're like, "Sage, he's stealing. And if you don't kick him out, we're all going to leave." And there's this sudden pause. Even the thief is like, "Yo, I want to see what this guy's going to say." you know? So, just a second, guys. The sage, there's a long pause. The sage very gracefully and says, "You guys can all leave. He will remain in the temple." And the disciples get shocked and they're like, "Why? What do you mean?" And he's like, "You guys are blessed enough to know the difference between right and wrong. This poor soul doesn't know the difference between right and wrong. Who else will teach him?" And it's like in that moment, the Zen story, I was reading it online. I was getting even emotional when I was reading. The Zen story says a torrent of tears, you know, finds the eyes of the disciples. And that's the thing. We can't banish problems. We can't run away from them either. The simplest way I can say is that if you remain honest, you'll trust yourself more. If you trust yourself more, you experience your karma. What your event oriented energetic outcome. That's the magnificence of this life, that it's unknown when you try to look at the edge of the universe, and it's unknown when you try to look behind your eyes. And so man's next greater technologies depends on how much he dares to confront the unknown. That means all human beings should wonder what an advanced civilization looks like while they're here and send a letter. And we should hold all those letters, and I don't know, maybe a bunch of TV stations could just, I don't know, read those letters every day or something. I mean, it's really interesting. we think we are very progressed as a civilization. But there is so many blind spots. There's literally a black hole in outer space. I mean that really like ends. That really prevents the successful indexing of the scientific indexing of the universe. It's like a black hole. What do we do with it? It's like our universe has a hole in it. Guys, there's this joke. This joke I'm gonna share. I just remembered. There's a wall, and there's a bunch of people in that wall, behind that wall, and there's this guy walking past this wall from the outside, and he hears all the people inside that wall shout, 11, 11, 11, 11. All the like. So imagine someone's walking by the street, and there's this wall, and then like this structure, this you know the wall of this building, and inside the yard of the building, there people are shouting, 11, 11, 11. And so this guy suddenly is like, what's going on? Why are these people shouting 11? And he sees there's a hole. He sees there's a hole there, you know. And he looks in there, and suddenly something soft like pokes him in the eye, you know. And then suddenly we hear all the people on the other side of the wall, 12, 12, 12. I don't know. Like that's the madness of society right there. And I think maybe if we look at the universe, there's a joke behind it. When we look inside the black hole. The best approach, the best view we can have on a black hole is that we are in the hole, and that outside the hole there is more. So you can see a black hole in space in a plane, in a two-dimensional plane, but you could see a black hole being like a bowling ball, but with only one hole. A black hole could be like a bowling ball with one hole, and we're inside that. We are inside the bowling ball. We are inside what appears to us as a black hole in space is actually we are inside a sphere. I think this should be taken seriously, no? This idea. Let's call it. Let's give it a name. Um, Mr. Within's uh, one black hole bowling ball theory. Or we could even think there's more. Yeah, guys. So what I'm trying to add to the universal database is this idea of, yeah, we're inside a sphere. I mean, a lot of things appear spherical. When atoms look in the mirror, they're spheres. When suns look in the mirror, they're spheres. When planets look in the mirror, they're spheres. When human beings look at the mirror, they're like, "What? I got two legs. Two hands, one head. What is this? I thought I was a sphere." The whole point of this episode, guys, is that whatever you do in this life, just keep it moving. That means when in Rome, be Roman. When a biological human form that requires activity, and also the activity is going to then echo into the inner, It's just you know what it is? It's like you can get the most excited group of people and energetic. Imagine 8 billion energized, inspired individuals. But if there is no greater prototype civilization that we're going to attempt, that's why Civilization 2.0 is my attempt at trying to see a prototype to future civilizations. One day the sky is going to become as much of our home as the earth was, you know. Your attention is the divine part of life. It's the unknown x variable in the mathematical equation of a linearized vision of the world. If your causal attention is organized, is ordered, that means your effect is chaotic. That means the person who is handling, who is um, uh, looking at chaos before order, endlessly is in paradise, endlessly enters paradise. The person who from order looks at chaos endlessly suffers. So the way we shift this algorithm of perception of suffering is by realizing that it's okay. There's chaos and order. The bird needs two wings to fly, as Rumi says. When you can understand that both of these elements are here, and your intelligence, as on some level, has to do with alertness. There's a lot of people not alert in society. There was this magician in this YouTube video where this magician, he was showing doing this magic show and stuff, and nobody, of course, like, you know, some people acknowledge the magician. You know, there was this old lady walking. The old lady slips on ice. Her head hits somewhere. It bleeds. He runs there shouting, trying to take care of the old lady and calling 911 or something, you know, and nobody did anything. People just walked past as if, like, I shouldn't get involved. And that was a sort of inner realm fog. That means people are celebrating others' defeats. Imagine you celebrate the victories. Imagine we get a whole civilization that every day we have more reasons to celebrate than to suffer. And if we can find a way to get people who every person is their own unique DNA, that means nobody has your eyes. And if you see something worth sharing, every human being should speak. You should share your inner realms. You should roar. This world is made to roar in. It's not made to let the wind push you only. There's a value to the individual life. Its value surpasses any belief. Its value is simply the opportunity of its being. The biggest question in philosophy in the future is if we can identify movement only in the personality. I need a quick intermission, folks. A couple minutes, I'll be back. Thank you. Okay. Let us entertain a view where we have, for one moment, considered, stripped away the names, the personalities, the communication of the human being. And we have simplified what is life to energy being conscious of itself. As an awareness of space and through a designed self. You see, it's like wondering about who you would have been if none of the language you have entertained so far was there. I personally have a memory before I learned language as a child. I was just witnessing an event. I was a kid in a cradle. I just remember the room, one glimpse image of the three-dimensional space. This is before I learned language. This is before I was an individual to myself, but there was a watcher. And we're not just watchers because we chose to be individual. Intelligence is conscious. Energy is conscious. So if we entertain this notion where it's just energy moving and being conscious of its movement, that means there is no meaning before meaning. So meaning feels like a creative act. That means this changes the view from finding truth towards uh, creative experience. If people say where is the legend born, or where are legends born? You know, it's the idea of man is born in the mind of man. The mind of man is an unknown kingdom. So it's as if in your outer realms you're a servant of the physical universe. Let's say the physical realm, the outer realms. You're a servant of your outer realms in front of your eyes. Behind your eyes, you are the king of your inner realms. And when I say king, it's not an ideological, but I want to tell you that you are free. You are free to be a world behind your eyes. Like if you really think about the psychology of the child, what is it? The child is not an individual. Okay? So the child is born as being first a subjective world. We can say the infant's brain is trying to copy the world to itself. It's trying to process just what the room is, what the event. It's just trying to get acquainted with the event-based mind. You know, the presence of the human being is not bound to location. It can't really be located. You can't have the same texture of certainty of it as you have with matter. Matter is very visible. It doesn't move. But in your inner realms, only attention holds whatever phenomena is there. So when you realize your free will to be attention, you will realize what is the ultimate freedom. When you give a lot of people ultimate freedom in society, as we see, they act like gods. There's many tyrants and dictators in the world currently as I speak. You know, just because the sun hits one part of the building doesn't mean it doesn't, the shadow side of it doesn't exist. There's always, remember, the chaos and order are both members of the civilization, you know. But it is in action. That means no person is really good and bad, because it's like, who is good, who is bad? The nature, like, this is a way more complex. More, this is the whole discussion of morality. But I'm just trying to share my view that it's like there's been days where I felt bad to myself, but then I woke up and I didn't feel bad anymore. And it's as if, what was it? Yesterday I was a bad person, now I'm a good person. Then I did something good and I felt good. So it's our action, it's the attention's decision that is the outcome of morality. So in other words, are you looking at life and do you honor it, or do you think this is just meaningless elements? That means it's too easy to feel that we are an atomic hallucination, that our personality, that consciousness. This is why I spoke about the subjective evolution. To be honest, all movements really, this system, I call it ring of the absent heaven. And so I see life through four dimensions, this plane of existence. I see it as void, I see it as singular, I see it as dualistic, and I see it as infinite. The moment you have duality, you have infinity. The moment the mind accesses dualistic living, it has the choice to reverse engineer itself through the singular towards the void, or it has an ability to go towards the infinite and attain the void that way. That means people are just choosing their routes of emptiness. And the opportunity of life is how full it is, There was this Sufi dervish who he thought he saw life and he knew what it was and its value. Then when he died, he suddenly realized he was alive. He realized the value of life after he was no longer alive. And so the mind of man should use any tool at hand. And your hand is like your intelligence is your greatest tool. That means if somebody tells you what is the most dangerous weapon on the planet, if they say a physical weapon, those people haven't looked at life good enough. The most dangerous weapon is impatience. For a civilization. Because if your inner realms expect something from the outer realms and it don't happen, you're going to build up this sense of feeling like the moment you can to hit back the world. You see, you got to renounce anger, not renounce intensity, but to renounce anger, which is getting possessed by the inner realms. So for me, the same way like in religion spoke about possession, when I see an angry, violent person in the street, I'm like, that's possession. That's possession right there. But it's not the possession of some abstract being in the thing. It's the possession of their past. They think their eyes sees truth more than the other, not realizing that truth was beyond both eyes. You see, we shouldn't fight over nothing if 99.9% of the atom is empty. It's like, what are we really fighting for? It's like, what am I, citizen of emptiness? Like, you gotta release the anger. There was Sogyal Rinpoche, from Tibetan Buddhism, the wisdom comes, the quote comes. I think it was from Sogyal Rinpoche, I could be getting the name wrong. But I think it's from Rinpoche, last name, which means that lineage. He says, unless you conquer anger, your enemies will be inexhaustible. Unless you can forgive the world before it forgives you, There won't be a backstory. That is the power of letting go. And that is the power, there's both of them are abilities. That's primarily one of the most basic abilities the human being has. You could go into your room, wherever you are, whoever you are, just wherever you are. You can look at what you feel is necessary and is unnecessary, and just whatever necessary or unnecessary mean to you. And the mind, once given a task, this is why they say the mind is a good servant. Once you give your mind a task, it builds life towards that direction. And imagine giving your mind a collective task, realizing the opportunity that we are born in the most exciting time in history. We are born at the precipice of the individual and the collective becoming inseparable again. We are at the edge of the world of the object and at the edge of the world of the subject and the collective witness, which is not an idea, which is not a thought, but is the effort of life through the human form. Whether we're temporal or eternal, in regards to consideration, wear your body like imperial armor, you know? There's a gentleness, honestly, in life. I don't know, like I totally understand that people are trying to get to places, so they gotta be in certain ways, but at the same time, there is a gentleness to life that in the middle of it's as if the child is born and somebody's shouting, "Run!" And the child is just running its whole life towards something. Okay? But not pausing, not having the gentleness to be like, wait a minute. What if there is a hidden greatness in the potential that I could be wrong? And then the mind begins, like, you go into that rhythm of the Descartian methodical doubt, where you're like, what if this? 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 And suddenly it's as if, like, everything one by one, all the dimensions of your realm, through a vast emptiness of the clarification of whatever experientially is in your moment, the doubt breaks the illusions. So for me, Rene Descartes was one of those rare human beings that somehow in his inner realms had found Thor's hammer, you know? And you can say, and he was using the archetype of doubt like Thor's hammer to break whatever subjective experiential position he had. So he was using like a divine hammer of his just this idea of trusting the moment and doubting everything, only to come to realize that he cannot doubt the isolated thinking subject. He cannot doubt the doubter. And that was a paradox moment in the Western Enlightenment, where Rene Descartes had to, after going through that experience, declare the mind and body dualism. And he was very brave to do so, and incredibly ahead of his time. Like Rene Descartes, for me, he's like, you want to see a time traveler, there you go. There was in some sort of tablet, I don't know where I read this, somewhere online, on this ancient tablet, it had written something like as if, like, the person was speaking to the future, the author of the tablet, and the author of the tablet was speaking as if it's humanity, human beings then, and the human beings then were saying, like, we will live for you in the future, so we will live for you. They're talking like just a second. They said, we will, in the tablet, the person is saying, he's talking to the future human beings, and he's saying to the future, and he's saying, we will live for you. We will live for your life so that you can give us eternal life. I wouldn't be surprised that on an energetic level, if energy doesn't die, the memory stands. So on some level, the person's like, okay, am I going through, is the world multidimensional, or am I journeying through these dimensions? You know, is the journeyer projecting the experience, or is the experience, does the experience have a merit beyond the just immediate existential value? When the worlds behind our eyes are released in front of our eyes, the world in front of our eyes finds a new way to breathe. Evolution is towards we are right now individual dash collective beings. In the future we will be the collective dash individual beings. And as we get closer and closer to the language threshold, the ultimate renunciation of an incredibly efficient and advanced civilization. That what started as humanity became the evolution of the universal sector. We have advanced successfully beyond the language threshold, the sequence sense. The ring of the absent heaven is, even at that point, no longer necessary. You take the ring off. For the might of this world, it can only enter through an honest gate. You know, in Vedic thought, they had this idea that the gods would come down to earth and ask for wisdom from these yogis and rishis, like Rishi Vyasa. And according to Rama, the reason for that is that in lesser dimensions, of course, Vedic thought sees a multidimensional landscape where human life is the bottom of a mountain, and there are higher dimensions up this mountain, the higher lokas. And the idea is, Rama would say that beings in lesser dimensions can't ask the question. And beings in higher dimensions than the human station uh, have too many answers. They don't need to ask the question. As if lesser dimensions too much suffering. They don't have time to ask the question. Higher dimensions too much pleasure. They can't. They don't have time. Too much of a paradisal feast. Sorry, paradisal feast. As if the gods, their minds are filled with the worlds that they fill. And the lesser dimensions, their minds are filled by higher worlds. And man is where the high and low can be noticed. Man is where the glitch of all simulations is best exposed. The human life is a rare opportunity. I mean, honestly, like, it's like, what is it? Either the animals in nature are slow, or we're really ahead of our time, or some unique event happened to the human being. Like, I don't know what happened. Like an alien gave us a high five, and we suddenly became conscious. I don't. Anyways, guys, it took us a while to evolve to be able to consciously direct the attention and to impose realms. Think of yourself as a self in a world. Think of the self as the concept and the world as the context. Your environment is the context. So, based on what environment you go in, usually the self is influenced by. But if you notice yourself beyond the external environment, then you can be in any inner realm environment. That means when it comes to the experience of suffering, the inner realms can change the texture. It doesn't change the suffering, but it changes the context of the information. So think of it this way: that all this life is we're this phenomena that is comprehending itself through different angles. I was in what was the town called? Gerenzano, in Italy, and I was in this hotel, and I remember I was outside having a cigarette, and I was alone and tired. I just got to the hotel, and there was this idea that came into my mind, that what if the cells, the red blood cells in my veins right now, suddenly created their own philosophies, languages, technology, civilization, the cells in my vein, okay? And they made their most complex and advanced mathematics. And then I realized, would they be able to comprehend why I go to work? And I realized they can't. There isn't the image for the comprehension. There's no space at that point for there to be an object. So the wonders of our world are deep. For when we don't bang the door shut, civilization can wake up with a fresher mind. Because we're all units of information if we really take ourselves too materialistically seriously. This is why we need the unknown. We need, it's a strange time where, because we have access to so much information, the unknown can naturalize them, you know? When you suddenly just stare at what's going on, this massive event called life, this grand happening. And then you'll suddenly see from what angle I'm speaking when I'm giving these talks. That if you care for something, you got to be able to see it properly. That means that's how a human being knows. If someone cares for you, they care to at the same time they care for the real you who's staring at them from behind your eyes. You know. At the same time, you have to care for the real them, which you'll never know. We need some sort of, I think it's an archaic revival of a newfound sense of honor. Terence McKenna, the scholar, gave the greatest hope by creating this concept of archaic revival. I mean, just put the two words together, but it's such a deep concept that it's just genius to point out. What's that hope? That there are, if history repeats itself, how many allies, how many solutions are also going to repeat? If we see the problem, and the problem is a pattern that in history that repeats, we're going to see the solution too. That means sometimes you can't let the problem define you, or there's no solution. You gotta, it's like Albert Einstein says this, you cannot solve a problem from the same consciousness that created it. That means the way you were looking at the problem, the answer is a completely different angle at looking at that same thing. And when you realize this, that whole explorer's fascination of intelligence arises. And hopefully, if everybody um, roars their inner realms, I feel a multidimensional renaissance is going to occur. And for the first time, we're going to maximize intelligence on the surface of the planet, but inner intelligence in accordance with outer. We don't want to have like, here's the thing. Think of every person in Silicon Valley having an inner child, and their inner child wants to see this cool, wants this better toy. Do you know? But if the toy it starts playing with you, then it's no longer a toy. Do you know? If AI computers become super intelligent computers define us, then it's no longer just a technology, and then there's a declaration of the enemyhood of machines, which we see. So it's like a chess game in accordance to how that system makes its chess move. But the wisdom in the situation is that it's so much easier to break things, and it takes so long for things to be made. You know, you can get rid of the artwork in an instant. You can share it to pieces in an instant, but at the same time, it took a while to draw. And life is like that. We commit to some sort of um, sensory simulated meaning, and we go through, and as Christian wisdom tells us, we realize we're in the world, but not of it. Your mind is more badass than atoms. Anyways, guys, I want to thank everybody for listening. And I'm going to show you this picture. If you look at the wallpaper, I'm going to post it there. There we go. So guys, this is, you can say, archaic metaphysics or traditional spirituality, okay? Where the human being would realize they are from nature, so the body would be administered by the what was seen as divine will, and nature were synonymous back in the day. Then when language developed, we could name gods. You know? People started naming gods like naming their children, like it was that easy. Of course, I'm just suggesting the simplicity of it doesn't take away from its sophistication. You know, Leonardo da Vinci says simplicity is the most ultimate sophistication. This yogi is realizing that he is a cosmic creature. But the squirrel can't see further, perhaps, than the tree branches. You know, we don't want to be squirrels of knowledge in this life for too long. What I mean by squirrels of knowledge is that we want to be eagles of knowledge. We want to fly into new fields. So you got to think about it this way, that your behavior is your different attention to the design of the moment. And that's where I think all problems dismantle. When you really look at what's going on, the problem is just an activity regardless of any rational or irrational narrative. Let me find there's a quote. Okay, guys, so the quote is a Sufi quote from this man named Zulnan, and the quote of it is Zulnan was asked, "What is the end of the mystic?" Question mark. Zulnan answered, "When he is as he was, where he was before he was." You know, language is really simulation like. When the ripples of the mind settle through stillness and silence, then you move as the world. The world becomes yourself, and the self becomes the world. The inseparability of attention with the whole moment, not just our identification with a certain phenomenological content of the moment. Napoleon, as this quote, he says, impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. This dude, it's like somebody told him impossible. He's like, get out of here, fool. Because the word doesn't need to exist, whether it's impossible or any other word, you know? Remember, after idol worship, we moved on to ideal worship. There was a time we were worshiping objects, they slapped the objects out of our hand, and we were like, oh, what else? What else can we worship other than an object? Then we realized, oh, subjects, you know? And so we have been worshiping symbology. We are symbol worshippers when we think about what knowledge really is. Our attention endlessly dwelling from symbolic value to another. And for me, in these patterns of constant journeying through symbolism, we as human beings have to care for the unknown rhythms. We have to literally feel like how every explorer that went and found a new part of the world felt. They're like, holy shit, there's more. Like that's the that's the slogan of the educational system. Or like a more discreet version of it would be there is so much more. That's it. And the child would just hear that slogan and run towards to see how far the eyes of our species can open. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Trust the energy that's just being conscious of itself. I mean, it doesn't get there's a doesn't get more complicated than that. Yeah. It's like the child was scared of a monster underneath the thing, and the the scientific father came in, and it's like, son, monster, what monster? It's all energy, potential energy and kinetic energy. Why are you getting scared about energy? And the son's like, yeah, you got a point. I can't even fathom energy to be scared of it. You're right. If everything's energy, I'm not scared of it. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. 4:54. Guys, honestly, I need a break, so I'm gonna end it off here. But probably in a couple hours, maybe, or when when the next time I can borrow Thor's hammer. Okay, guys. All right, whatever. Let's set up this Discord. Actually, guys, I feel I'm gonna call it a night, even though it's not night. But yeah. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Much blessings and all.